Hey everyone, George Weber here, G. Weber Arts. We're here in the cave, and this project is going to be a combination train table on the top and a storage bench underneath. So before we get into the build, let's take a look at the problem we're trying to fix. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to make our first cut. Um, what I've done is uh, figured out my leg length, which is the height of my desk minus the height of my wheels, the thickness of my tabletop surface, and 1 inch of foam, which will eventually be sitting on top of the table surface. So that gives me a total of 31 inches, which will be, not exactly the same as the desktop, but very close. And what I'm doing is I've got this measured out at a little over 31 inches because I want to square up the ends, because sometimes the ends on the cuts from the mills and whatnot are not totally square. So I'm about a 31 1/4 on this. So once I make this cut, I can flip it around, square up that end, and the two ends will be square. Now, for making the other legs, normally I would use a block stop, but I don't have anything long enough to use as a sacrificial fence and create my little block stop that's 31 inches long. So what I'll be doing is after I get my first leg cut, I'll be matching it up to the board. I will be clamping the two together and then marking my board and making sure my cut is as accurate as I can be. If I'm off by, say, a 1/16 or less, I'm golden, and I can always, sand them a little bit or whatever. All right, so safety glasses, obviously. You might want to adjust your sound. This will be pretty loud, probably. I'm going to make sure my cut is in the right place. Yep, that looks good. Just like that. I'm going to grab my leg and then lift my saw blade. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now that we've got our legs cut, we need to figure out exactly how the legs are going in and how they get braced and so forth. Now, the tabletop will have a frame of stringers going all the way around, and this represents the outside edges, the 8 foot. And then I need to measure the inside for this stringer, And then I need to, of course, place my legs, something to that effect. And one over here. And I will need to measure this outside distance as well, which should be pretty much the same as this stringer here, creating a nice cross brace for the legs. Now the cross brace I'm going to be putting to the inside, not the outside, and the reason I'm putting it to the inside is once this is flipped over, there will be another tabletop shelf here, which will then be supported by the brace going across here on the very end. And then, of course, in that frame, just like this frame, there will be crossbars going through the middle. So let's take a look at what we've got. It looks like my stringer here is going to be, well, if I round it off by a fraction, and I do mean a fraction, 45 inches. Yep, 45 inches. All right. Okay, so as you saw, we got our cross braces cut, and I'm just going to do an initial test fit to make sure that everything works the way I think it should. As we already know, this cross brace goes along, the stringer, I should say, goes along the long stringers like that. Then our legs come in and will essentially be something to this effect. And then this piece will come in something to this effect. And it looks pretty good. So I'm going to get this up on the work table and get this attached to the legs and get it squared up as much as I possibly can. Okay, so I have my first leg assembly put together, and I'm going to walk you through the process on what I did, and then we'll tape shooting the other one together, and you'll see what I'm doing. Okay. Leg parts, try to keep anything from getting underneath it, because anything that's underneath it may throw the square off a little bit. I'm going to put that one there, and this one I'm just going to rest here, because remember, these have to go on opposites. Glue's being stubborn. Come on. There it goes. Get a little glue in there. And then I'm going to set it in place. And it's going to want to slide around some. So I'm using the speed square to get the basic in positioning. That looks pretty good. And we're going to make sure that's tight that way. And that's tight that way. See, now that moved a whole bunch. But that's the process, is you kind of have to monkey with it a little bit. And the first corner is usually the hardest. Once you get the first one done, The rest of them seem to want to play along a lot better. There we go. All right, so that gets me positioned pretty good. Now, I'm drilling more or less in the center, and I'm offsetting them at a slight angle. And I don't actually need to do that, but I just like it. So I'm using 2.5-inch deck screws. And I like the deck screws a lot for a couple of reasons. One, they're vinyl coated, so if you're doing something outdoors, they don't rust. Indoors, in a moist garage, that's sometimes moist anyways, in the winter, they also won't rust. The vinyl also makes them slide in easier. And instead of a Phillips head, they have a keyed, like a star type head, which means you can really drive them pretty nicely without too much trouble. Now, I'm just going to get this one in like that, and before I put my next screw in, I'm going to square up that end, and that'll let me have a little bit of movement. If I need it. So I get my speed square in there. Oh, look, that looks good. Yep, that's looking pretty good so far. Again, we're going to put in the glue and repeat the squaring process, which seems on the surface pretty dumb. And maybe it is, but it's just the way I kind of do it. It's sort of like double checking everything. That's very good. Now this end has already got a screw in it, so I can unclamp it. See, that moved. The glue acts like a lubricant, and things just want to move. That looks pretty good. And pop that out. Pop in our drill bit. Another reason I'm kind of close together on these and towards the center is because at some point I have to drill screws in this way, and I have to be able to miss those screws. Little countersink bit action like that. That was the word I was trying to think of before, countersink. And then our 2.5-inch screw. just like that. Pop the clamp off. Give me a little room. One there. One there. And that side is done. Now, move that over there. And take this. Set it down. Flip it around. And now, even our table edge will help us square things up a little bit. So we'll get this in place. Pop that off. And there we have it. Tight, solid, and I'm pretty sure square. Okay, so here we are. I've been putting in the leg sections, and to help me do that, I used a 2x4x8 and just screwed it into the legs temporarily in order to get them more or less in square. So it'll just stabilize them while I'm screwing all this together. I've already done all these corners. I'm finishing up with this corner. Once this corner is done, then I can put on the two side stringers that will be the bottom actually. Once that's done, we can attach the wheels and turn this thing over and put in some cross braces in the top and in the bottom section for the plywood. And then once those are in, we put in the plywood and we're pretty much done. So I'm going to get on with that, and we'll be back in a little while. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to done as far as the frame, basic frame is concerned. Right now I'm putting on the wheels. I pre-drilled some holes using a drill bit extension so I could get past the wheel. You know, it's just so I know where the holes are exactly. Put that over there. Realistically, if I was going to do this, I should be putting the wheels more outboard, which makes it easier to get at the locks. But because the bottom stringers are the least level thing on this whole thing as compared to the legs and the cross stringers, I decided to put the wheels on here. Even though it's a little harder to get at the locks, it will make the wheels sit on a much more level base than these long stringers. Well, we got interrupted by a couple of phone calls, but simple enough. Put the wheels on the bases. That was easy. Cut some 45-inch cross braces and put them in at roughly 21¼ inches on center, give or take. Now we just have to flip it over, put in 3 more cross braces for the top, and then it'll be just a matter of putting in the base and the top, and we'll be done. And there we go. Isn't that just lovely? Now we have one big giant rolling table. Okay, so I got my 3 cross braces cut, and I guess here we go. All right, there we have it. We have our frame. Okay, so it's kind of late in the day, the next day, and we're going to try to finish this up. I've clamped the two boards that go underneath together. I'm hoping to cut all four corners at once if my little saw will handle it. And I've marked off the corners that need to come out so that they fit all around the legs. I've given myself a little bit of extra space. I don't need it to be a tight fit. So we're going to see how this goes, and hopefully I can get it all put together tonight. And there we go. Ryobi jigsaw. Inexpensive? Not too bad. Probably the only non-DeWalt tool I own. That's a power tool anyways. All right. Spun around the right way. There we go. Drops right in like a charm. All right, kick it around from the backside a little bit, get everything lined up, put some screws in it. As I mentioned before, I cut my slots a little on the deep side in order to give myself a little room to fudge this thing around. I could have made a very tight fit, but I couldn't see the purpose in doing that. And yes, I am going to countersink and pre-drill so that I don't have to worry about splitting wood. So we're going to start with that corner right there. All right, I'm going to do the other two corners, and then I will also be putting in center screws after I get all four, or all 8 corners, I should say, nailed down, lined up, so forth and so on. All right, so now that I've got the bottom secured at the 8 corners, I will also at some point be putting in screws that go along the cross braces in a few places, but that's hard to illustrate, so I'm going to show you what I'm doing up on the top, which is basically the same thing. First, on this side of the table, I've marked off on the top a pencil line where each of my cross braces is. Then I've lined up the corners the best I could, and I've tacked down the far corner and gotten this one lined up based on that. Pretty good. I'm off by an eighth of an inch, give or take. Not a big deal. That's just, the table being off left or right slightly. Now, what I've done is I've taken a chalk line and I've hooked it on that side where my cross brace is. Then I come over here and I can look at the screws, and I can very simply snap a chalk line and I'll know where my screws are. That's not a very dark one, but I can see it well enough. If you don't have a chalk line, obviously you could use a good size level and do the same thing, or a ruler, pretty much anything. Once you've got one side marked and you can square it up reasonably well, you won't have much trouble marking off your screws. All right, well, let's take a look at how we did. Table's all assembled, and we've got Rickety Railroad and Danger Track all set up, well, the track's not set up, obviously. Down here, I've got my generator. Behind the generator, I've got my portable table saw. Behind my portable table saw, I've got my sliding miter saw, my circular saw, 2 boxes of bits and parts and bolts and screws, my big portable tool bag, my small portable tool bag, my DeWalt air compressor, and I've got a big toolbox over here full of odds and ends, mostly airbrush stuff and whatnot. And then back here, I've got my crosscut, and I still have an enormous amount of space back here where I can put things. All right, so let me get this into position where it belongs, and then we'll do the final recap on the whole thing, on the whole project, and see what we've got. All right, so now we've got our table in place, and we're going to do a quick recap on the build. Now, first of all, as you already know, I used 5/8 by 4 by 8 plywood, so it's 5/8 thick and it's 4 by 8. I used 2 by 4s. I bought 12 2 by 4s. I probably could have gotten away with, I think, 10, maybe 11, because I still have 1.5 left over. So it's kind of a gray area on that one. In terms of the total cost, this is where things get a little iffy, only because there's variations. Now, when I bought my plywood and my 2 by 4s, I also bought the shelf and the brackets and the screws to mount the shelf onto the brackets. And I was still under $200, pretty well under $200. Now, I already had the deck screws and I already had wheels. So if you add in the price of buying deck screws and you're buying wheels, that ups the price a little bit, but you're not buying the shelf. That brings the price down. And then, of course, depending on where you live, the price of plywood and the price of 2 by 4s can vary. Also, I already had this foam base that I'm using. It's not the type I like. I plan on getting the nice Corning pink foam, which is very flat. And that cost about 30 some odd dollars. So I didn't include that in the initial pricing because I thought, well, maybe somebody might build this as a work table to build cabinets on, or refinish furniture on, or use for any number of purposes. It's a good, solid, heavy rolling table for your workshop, your garage, for whatever it is you want to use it for. If you were going to laminate the top with melamine or hardboard or something like that, that changes the cost, not by much, but it does change the cost. So my $200 price tag on this could be down, could be up, depending on how you build it and what your end purpose is. That said, let's see, what else can I tell you about it? I think it's a good deal. I think it's going to work great. And I'm hoping that you've learned some stuff during this video, and I hope you will subscribe to our channel and comment a bunch. Give me your ideas on what you think I could change or improve on this table, or maybe ways that you would do it that would be a little bit cheaper, but still solid. I know that 2 by 4s were probably overkill. And speaking of 2 by 4s, when you buy your 2 by 4s, buy kiln dried 2 by 4s. Do not buy green wood studs from outside in the lumber yard, because as they dry out, they will change shape and they'll start to bow and warp, and it'll make your table go wonky. If you buy kiln dried 2 by 4s, which do cost a little bit more, you're not going to run into that many stability problems, and all you need to do is pick good straight 2 by 4s from the stack, and you'll be pretty much good to go. So I think that's it for this video. And again, I hope you'll give us a thumbs up, and I hope you'll make some comments and hopefully subscribe to our channel as well. And we will see you on our next video here in the cave.